Good afternoon for everyone joining us. We're going to get started in just a moment, but thank you for joining us today for today's webinar, What is the status of the proposed stimulus program and how to prepare for when it is passed. We're going to be joined by Senator Blumenthal in just a couple of moments, but before we do, would like to thank all of our sponsors who helped put this programming on for us. Connecticut Natural Gas, Southern Connecticut Gas, and UI, part of the Avangrid family, who has so generously supported all of our business programs that we've done throughout the course of this year related to the pandemic. Also, our premier and key and principal investors, the companies that you see on the screen right now, have all done a lot of great work to support the chamber throughout this year and of all years. We always need their support, but especially this year, it's been especially impactful. So coming up in just a few minutes, we're going to hear from Senator Blumenthal about the latest on the stimulus bill. Now, as we were planning this event, we originally thought we'd be talking about what the law of the stimulus bill was, but last night I saw a video on Twitter and changed my whole outlook of what was going on, and I'm sure many others. So Senator Richard Blumenthal, thank you so much for joining us. I smirk, but it is serious stuff. We all celebrated that there was going to be a stimulus for so many of our businesses and other activities going on, and in question now, but thank you so much for joining us, and maybe you can give us an update on what's going on.
I will give you an up-to-the-minute update, unfortunately with some bad news. The president has just vetoed the National Defense Authorization Act. So for all of you who are in the defense supply chain, for all of you who have relatives in the military who are counting on a pay increase, for all of you who are concerned about our cyber defense, where new tools and authorities, we're in the NDAA, National Defense Authorization Act, for all of you who care about our nation's security, we have reason to worry now. The good news is I believe this veto will be overridden. I hope it will be overwhelmingly overridden. I'm not going to bore you with the reasons that the president gave for vetoing it because they are utterly and totally preposterous. This move is really pathetic and crazy and downright dangerous. But I'm hoping that we will come together on a bipartisan basis for a veto override. Now, that's entirely separate from the reason for our call, which is the good news, namely, we have another pandemic relief package, smaller than I hoped, long delayed, and you know we have been talking about another round of relief, particularly an extension of the PPP program, which is in this relief package for some time. And I want to go through some of the details with you. Extension of unemployment insurance for 11 weeks at $300. Stimulus payments for families earning less than $75,000, $600 per person, so that's $2,400 for a family of 4. Checks go out, payments are released right away, literally within days. The vaccine distribution, very important. There are about $15–20 billion to get this vaccine into people's arms. You know, important to the restaurants, retailers, businesses that depend on people having some sense of security, as well as many of you as employers. And no state and local aid, but some of the infrastructure needs are met through this program. For example, there's about $45 billion for transportation, $4 billion alone for the MTA, other kinds of essential public transit needs and infrastructure. And I know, most important to many of you, another round of PPP in the magnitude of about $285 billion. More flexible. It can be used for vendor supplies and repairs. More targeted. Businesses that are 25% quarter for 1 quarter below a previous year's quarter. So losses at some part of the year must be shown. smaller than 300 employees, focusing on the smaller employers. And for restaurants, the amounts are 3.5 monthly payroll expenses, as opposed to 2.5 for the rest of the business. So restaurants have been singled out for more targeted treatment. Smaller business, set aside for them. Again, talking about less than 50 employees. Those businesses will have a specific set aside, aid going to community institutions that benefit them. There are other elements of this package that are very important for all of you, and I'm happy to answer any questions, but I know in previous conversations, many of you have asked about the EIDL loan, $10,000. That problem is solved. Tax treatment, solved. The expenses are deductible. People who've contacted me about the refusal to allow businesses to deduct the expenses, absolutely right. We've taken care of that problem. We have, there are a variety of other parts of this program that I think are very important. And I want to answer your questions if you have any. Unfortunately, because of this veto, I have to get on a conference call to decide what we're going to do about it and what the timing is going to be. So forgive me that I'm probably going to have to run earlier than I hoped and thought I would. But I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have. I know a question on some of your minds may be, what's the president going to do about this one? Because he has said, this package is a disgrace. That's his word, disgrace. Because the stimulus payments are $600, not $2,000. And just so everybody's clear, Mr. President, I'm all in on $2,000. You want to do $2,000? Fine by me. The Republicans blocked going with the higher amount. So I'm hoping he'll get in touch with McCarthy and McConnell, smooth the way. We'll do it by unanimous consent. The amendment can go to him and it can be part of this bill. I think you'll find Democrats in general will take that stance. But the practical fact of the matter is that Republicans are unlikely to go along with unanimous consent. That requires everybody agreeing to it. It's unanimous. And that's the only way that this amendment could be part of that bill. My suggestion is that we do the $2,000 stimulus payments in a separate package. Sign this measure, get money into people's hands so they can enjoy it for the holiday, extend unemployment insurance, start the PPP program, which businesses desperately need, allow us to go forward. $900 billion, smaller, later than it should have been. I agree. I said at the very beginning, but at least we have it. And by the way, even though it's smaller than it should be, it's still the second largest relief package in the history of the United States. The first and biggest being the CARES package, which was a couple of $1 trillion, but 900 billion is the second largest. And so we need to put this relief in people's hands. I have seen how people are hurting, businesses are struggling. I've been to the food lines. I'm going to be at a homeless shelter tomorrow. I don't have to tell anyone on this call how the pandemic and the economic crisis continues to grip America. And I think we need to get that vaccine out there, get it into people's arms, because that's the way a vaccine is effective. Vaccine itself does nothing. Vaccination is the key. And this bill is necessary for everybody in Connecticut to have access to the vaccine. So, Garrett, thank you for having me. I apologize that I may be a little bit briefer than I thought, but I'm happy to answer questions.
No, thank you, Senator. We appreciate you just jumping on such short notice. So what do you think as far as a timeline to be able to, obviously what the president said last night kind of threw everything up in the air. First, I guess, are the votes there to override his veto if he did veto the package? And from everything I've heard today, it sounds like the potential for $2,000 would be handled as a separate kind of issue, standalone issue. And just off of that, then do you think that businesses, people who are on unemployment would start to see funding coming to them?
Well, you know from the last package that PPP started within what, a week, 10 days? This one should be a lot quicker because we've done it before. You know, the forms, the eligibility, you know, we're all familiar with the process, and the lenders don't have to reinvent the wheel. And the smaller lenders, put aside the big banks, they don't have to reinvent the wheel. So I think it can flow kind of seamlessly beginning, you know, we're at the end of this week essentially, but next week it could open for the PPP. If you were to sign it, you know, tomorrow, it could start right away. I think that hope may be somewhat in vain, but it's you know, the checks, the payments, the Secretary of Treasury said they'll be out within days, and I have no reason to think otherwise. And then the rest of the programs will also flow right away.
And you know, one of the challenges that everyone had when PPP first got out was getting it to the smallest of businesses, minority-owned businesses. I know a lot of revisions were made during the summer to the bill. Sometimes when I'm talking to businesses, I think, you know, people made decisions when they first saw PPP and they've never looked back at it again, even though it's changed a lot, and then changed even more in this latest round, and all in terms of being more flexible, covering more payments. But, you know, any thoughts on just how we get this message out to businesses that did not take advantage of it in the past?
Good question. They should know that the uses of this money are more flexible. Remember, on the first round, it was payroll, rent, utilities. In this round, it's also repairs of property, payments to vendors. I just came from a restaurant in Stonington, the Water Street Cafe. They are hanging by a thread. They're going to immediately apply for another major PPP, and they're going to be able to use it to pay some of their vendors. You know, they buy fish from the fishermen locally. They buy produce from farms in the area. There's going to be a big shot in the arm for the local economy, not just because of that restaurant, but the multiplicity of effects. And it's a boost for the economy. It's a shot in the arm. But just like the vaccine shots in the arm, the first has to be followed by a second. I got the vaccine to show people that I have trust and confidence in the safety and efficacy of this vaccine. I have to go for another shot to make it effective. Same with this idea, with this pandemic relief package. I'm looking forward to another package under a new administration. And this one really provides some breathing room. It's a bridge, it's a down payment.
And Senator, as far as just the overall pandemic response, the vaccines rolling out, that's, you know, from our standpoint, seem smooth. Just what are some of the things that are going on? Do you feel like we're getting the vaccine out and that we'll have enough to get people vaccinated if we get that messaging through over the next several months?
The vaccine is going to be increasing in amounts. Moderna, as you know, is on its way to people. It requires less exacting refrigeration. It can be shipped more easily. It's designed to go probably to the rural areas, but also to urban areas, whether in Connecticut or elsewhere. And there's a difference in the timeline for the second shot, but it is the same basic technology, the messenger RNA. There are other vaccines under development, less advanced in their clinical trials. I think the point here is that this pandemic relief package provides money for transportation, storage, distribution, training of the workers who are actually going to put the shots in the arm, And I think it will be increasingly widely available. But people need to have confidence. They need to be willing to do it. And as you know, we're all safer when we're all safer. It's really a matter of everyone cooperating. But, and here's a big but, for I would say a good part of this coming year, maybe the whole year, people are going to have to continue to wear masks, do physical distancing, take other precautions. I am hopeful that by the spring, some of these restrictions on the numbers of people, for example, in restaurants, will be eased. But this winter is going to be, this next 8 weeks is going to be tough because you've seen the numbers, you know how this wave of infection is rising. Deaths, hospitalizations, fortunately, the therapeutics are better. The docs are learning how to deal with the disease, and that means fewer people are dying. But still, it is a massive threat to our economy as well as our health.
Sir, I know you have to run in just a couple of minutes, but just let everyone know if anyone has questions, you can put them in the chat right now. Senator, with President-elect Biden coming in, what should we expect as far as activity in January and the first few weeks of the new administration?
I think there will be a rapid, prompt, massive effort to deal with the pandemic. You know, I'm not telling any secrets. The president-elect has made a priority of being cautious, taking precautions, protecting everyone around him, including himself, and avoiding crowds. So his priority is going to be getting the vaccine out, providing better therapeutics, supporting science, believing in science and public health experts, not sugarcoating the threat, but being positive. You know, I've heard a number of times the saying, think positive, test negative. I think that's what he will do. And of course, he now has the vaccine himself. I think there'll be some communities that we need to reach. The ambassador program at Yale New Haven and Yale Medical School provides an excellent example of ambassadorial emissaries to communities, Black and brown communities, other communities that may rightly and understandably have some suspicions. And that's one of the reasons why I wanted to take the vaccine. By the way, it was totally painless, literally. I didn't know that the nurse had done it. I was talking to someone, I turned around and I said, okay, you can give me a shot now. And she said, I've already done it. I had no after effects, none. So this vaccine in some ways may be easier than the flu vaccine, where some people do have some after effects. I haven't, but I know some people have. I think in terms of what to expect from the administration, part of it will depend on, frankly, bluntly, Mitch McConnell. He has to cooperate with President Biden. But if we have cooperation, we'll have another major, robust relief package to boost the economy, to use fiscal policy, not just monetary policy, but fiscal policy. And I'm hoping that it will be a major infrastructure commitment. Roads, bridges, rail, airports, VA facilities, schools, broadband. We've talked a little bit about broadband. This package, by the way, has about $6 billion for expanded broadband, which is essential to our kids attending school remotely. It's essential to businesses communicating. It's essential to life generally. And yet, up to a third of our seniors, a third of our minority communities are without connectivity. And it's essential to live in today's world. So I think a major commitment to broadband, economic recovery, pandemic relief, health care as a priority.
And Sarah, I know you have to go, so we'll let you go. But one last question, and you kind of answered this before, but your best guess, do you think that this stimulus bill will be signed into law in the next few days, or we're going to be waiting for a while, or even that there might have to be an override in this situation?
You know, Garrett, in a normal time with a normal president, and by that I mean George Bush, uh, either one of the George Bush presidents, uh, you know, we would say, well, it'll be within the next few days. He'll sign it. We'll have a signing ceremony. He'll celebrate this effort, bipartisan, approved overwhelmingly, by the way. I think the final vote in the Senate was something like 6 against out of 100. You know, a bipartisan bill overwhelmingly approved, and yet we're talking about a possible veto. It is, in some ways, just nuts that the president would be mentioning a possible veto. So this is a long-winded way of saying, I don't predict what President Trump may do. I hope for the sake of the country, I hope for all of our sakes that he allows it to become law, because really the consequences of us failing to do so are complicated, and none of them is good. There's no good news if he vetoes it. So I am hopeful, I'm knocking on wood, that he will sign it, and it'll be a good way to begin the new year. But I think we'd be prepared to override it within days if he refuses to do it. That would be my prediction.
Well, Senator, thank you so much for taking the time. Thank you for getting this stimulus bill passed. I know it didn't have everything in it that everyone wanted, but for so many of our businesses, you visited many times in New Haven, but I've been with you a few times when we've talked to businesses, and I know it'll make a great deal of difference for them and for the many that are unemployed and waiting for something to change. So
let me just say, Garrett, I really appreciate that comment, but I appreciate even more the advocacy of many of you on the call. You remember we had a call, I don't know how many months ago, at the very beginning of this era. And I've heard from the events industry, I've met with them throughout the state. Save Our Stages, by the way, is in this bill. For those of you who depend on the Long Wharf and the Schubert and the Yale Rep being open, there's aid for those venues, entertainment centers around the state of Connecticut. We really value our cultural treasures, but they also bring people downtown to the restaurants, to the retailers. Save Our Stages is in the bill. Key parts of the Restart Act. I've visited businesses throughout the state of Connecticut, and what I admire about what you've done is your advocacy and your activism. Whenever I've said to you, please tell your colleagues in other states, you've done it. And I think there has really been a movement behind it. I've devoted more time to this issue, economic recovery, pandemic relief, healthcare steps, than I can remember any other issue. And I'm not in any way regretful, because we've had successes, the CARES Act, now this measure, the earlier steps, but it's because of your activism and advocacy. And just to finish on a point that I know is close to your heart, chambers of commerce now are eligible.
Thank you. Thank you
they
very
are
much.
eligible. We heard you. We've listened.
Thank you.
And by the way, you should tell your friends in the media that TV and radio broadcasters and newspapers are now eligible. So they are, in fact. I'm not saying it because I, want to single them out, but there's a lot of flexibility, a lot of good things here, and reasons to really be satisfied with a bipartisan effort. I cannot tell you how important that is and how regretful I would be if the president vetoes it. But I didn't think he was going to veto the NDAA. And just so you understand, on economic terms, national security this is a tremendous blunder. But in economic terms, the subs manufactured in Groton, the aircraft engines at Pratt & Whitney for the F-35, the helicopters at Sikorsky, the supply chain up and down throughout our region. Many of you are on this call. You know that aerospace, submarines, many other weapon systems are made right here in Connecticut. We are the arsenal of democracy. So we can be proud that we contribute to our national security, but it's also extremely important to jobs. And the president's veto, I deeply regret. And I just want to add on a positive note, everybody stay well, have a wonderful holiday, safe and happy, and please stay safe and well. And I look forward to spending more time with you, if not before the new year, early in January. Maybe I can come back and talk to you sometime in the first couple of weeks of January.
Great, thank you, Senator. And we have you tentatively scheduled for our legislative forum on January 14th. So we'll look forward to seeing you then. So I appreciate it. Thank you. Happy holidays.
Be well, everyone. Take care.
Great. Thank you. And Senator Richard Blumenthal, and you just heard the latest of what's going on in Washington. We want to break a little bit of that down. We don't have all the answers for you, but I want to welcome in Brian Kerrigan, who is a partner with Whittlesey, an accounting firm here in our region, a strong chamber supporter. And Brian, thanks for joining on with us. Brian, I know, as we were just talking about, this is not even law yet. This is just a bill, a stimulus bill, but there are in the voluminous pages that are out there, some of the details. I know you've been taking a look at them. What things just stand out to you from a starting point in terms of what is in this stimulus bill that was passed by Congress? And you're on mute there, Brian.
I think the things that stand out to me are that there's some new costs that you can now use the money for. I think Congress heard from people who are having to, recreate their space to be able to have their business. So they talked about worker protection costs. There's Senator Blumenthal talked about supplies. So if you have supplies, there's now a covered supply cost. If you have property damage due to looting, there's covered property damage costs if they weren't covered by insurance. And covered operations expenditures, which is software that's used to run your business, can now be, the PPP funds can be spent on that. I think the one thing that they did carry over from the previous PPP rules is that you still have to spend 60% of the money on payroll. So I think that's still in there. So though there's more different types of costs that you can spend the money on, you still have to primarily spend it on payroll. I think in terms of eligibility, in the first round, we were dealing with entities that were smaller than 500 employees. Now we're dealing with entities that are smaller than 300 employees. We're also dealing with a 25% gross receipts reduction test. So a business to be eligible has to demonstrate that they had a 25% reduction in receipts comparing a quarter from 2020 to a quarter in 2019. So I think those are some of the highlights. The principal loan amount is still 2.5 times payroll, average monthly payroll cost for most companies. It is, as Senator Blumenthal said, it is 3.5 for restaurants and entities in the NAICS 72 classification. The maximum amount of the loan has changed from about $10 million down to about $2 million. So I think the combination of reducing the number of employees, targeting it towards companies that have a more sustained revenue drop, will help in terms of getting access to the funds for some of our smaller businesses.
Hey, Brian, as you understand it right now, there are people who did not apply for PPP before they're eligible, just like they were. There's more money now back into the program, but really it's about the people who have done PPP once, but now, as you were mentioning, targeted towards those small businesses that can now go into it a second time. Is that the correct way to understand this?
Yeah, that is the correct way to understand it. So it's referred to as a PPP second draw. So, if, let's use a restaurant, for example, that got the original PPP loan, spent the money on payroll costs and mortgage interest, rents, utilities, and they went through that money and they've applied for forgiveness. They're going to be allowed to be able to get a second round. So, specifically in the restaurant industry, hopefully the 3.5 times the average monthly payroll cost is helpful. Well, go ahead.
And do you, the way that will work, and this is a more detailed question, so if you don't have the details on this, completely understand, but would you see it as that they would use the time period going forward, a time period in 2021, or is it some type of look back into 2020?
Well, the look back part is you have to look back at a quarter in 2020 and compare it to a quarter in 2019. The covered period would be in 2021. So we still have this concept of a covered period, whether it's going to be 8 or 24 weeks or something in between. The new legislation seems to say that it can be any date between 8 weeks after the origination of the loan and 24 weeks after the origination of the loan. And that was, there were some banks who thought that you either had to go 8 or 24. And we had always read the legislation to say that once you exhausted the funds, you could apply for forgiveness. So I think they've sort of crystallized that element a little bit.
One of the questions in the chat, and this is a question session, so if anyone has questions, feel free to put them in there. Will there be a FTE requirement to bring jobs and people back? That was one of the big questions that I know we dealt with at the beginning of PPP.
Yeah, the new bill is silent on whether we'll still have these FTE base periods. My guess is that we will have the FTE base periods and that people will be expected to bring their payroll back up to their base period levels to get full forgiveness. But a little bit of that is speculation on my part, because the new bill does not really address the full-time equivalency reduction or the wage and hourly reduction.
Right, and obviously so much has changed, I imagine, for many businesses over the course of the last several months. The senator seemed to think, he alluded that, hey, once it's passed, we can get these rolling out the door really quickly. Do you think it will be that way? Are there a lot of unanswered questions where we're going to have to wait on SBA to give answers, or is it really just reloading the program that was already in place and so start applying?
I think it'll be relatively quick. I mean, I think there's some nuances in this statute that are going to change some of the application documents, like, the ability to take 3.5 times for certain companies of the average monthly payroll cost. I mean, the banks have experience doing this, I think, which is the biggest key. When we originally rolled this out in March or April, late March, early April, no one had ever had any experience with the PPP, so everything was new. So I think we already have most of the infrastructure in place to be able to do this. Now, one of the keys in the legislation is the SBA has 10 days to provide rules and regulations related to the act. So I'm not sure if any of the banks are going to move before the expiration of the 10-day period, waiting on additional rules and regulations from the SBA. But they seem to set that up to be a very quick turnaround in terms of the SBA promulgating rules and regulations related to the statute.
And as far as do you expect, one of the big issues also that I know became kind of a rush during the original run on PPP was, hey, they're going to run out of money, hurry up, get your application in. We always, tell people, you don't want to be waiting on these programs, but just given what the new rules of the program are, the amount of funding put towards it, Do you think it's one of these things like if you don't act right away, as soon as the door opens, you're going to be left in the cold? Should people have that kind of, I guess, panic as they go about it? Just understanding what you've seen so far in terms of the funding that's there.
Yeah, I don't think anybody should be panicked. So there's $285 billion of funding for this. And a lot of it is set aside for, smaller communities, minority communities. So I think the access will be better this time around, which will be helpful. I certainly wouldn't delay getting my application in. I mean, I think once the banks are ready to receive the applications, I would get the applications in. I know a lot of banks struggled with trying to process all the applications. Hopefully, having been through this one time before, it'll be a little bit of a smoother process. But I also think when you cut down from 500 to 300 employees, when you cut down to you have to demonstrate a 25% revenue loss, when you cut down the maximum loan to 2 million from 10 million, there should be more funds to go around for small businesses. You're probably not going to have the Ruth Chris steakhouses and some of these larger restaurant chains getting money in this time around.
And one of the big changes also in the stimulus, I know, impacts taxes. There's been a lot of questions throughout the course of this year as to how the stimulus funds that have already been received, how would the tax treatment be around that? Pretty big changes and clarifications, I guess, that Congress made in this bill, right?
Yeah, so the IRS came out and basically said, though the statute says the income is not taxable income when the loan is forgiven, that the expenses that it was used to pay for were not going to be deductible. So this bill has made pretty clear that the forgiveness is not income. The expenses are deductible. And if you have a partnership or an S corporation, there'll be no effect on your outside basis and those investments. So I think they've made a very, clear-cut decision that it's probably not in the best interest of the economy for these smaller businesses to be paying a $200 billion tax bill on their PPP funds. So I think in some ways that alone should be helpful to people. And then if they're able to get another round, hopefully that gives them some of the help they need in order to kind of weather this pandemic.
With that welcome news, is there a lot that businesses need to do right now? I know some firms, they pay quarterly, prepay their taxes, things like that. So is that going to make a big change for people right now at the end of the year?
It probably won't, because the fourth quarter estimates for individuals are due on January 15th. So the most likely people were waiting to get the news as to whether this was going to pass to determine whether they needed to make a 115 estimated payment or not. So at this point, the PPP expenses will be deductible. The issue is it's really important to our C corporations. Because most of our professional C corporations try to zero out their income every year so that they're not double taxed on income and potentially on dividends out of the company. So I think our C Corp clients are starting to breathe a little bit easier. Obviously, we still have a little ways to go because we don't have a presidential signature on the bill. So things are still a little bit in flux at this point.
And just wrapping up here, for businesses that are going to be eligible to either apply for the first time or tap into PPP for a second time, what would you recommend that they do right now while the banks have, this has not been signed into law yet. The banks obviously are also not accepting their loans yet. What types of things should they be thinking about though, so to be prepared?
Well, I think one of the things that you have to do is you have to demonstrate this 25% reduction. So I think part of what you want to do is print out comparative financial statements for each quarter to see if you have the 25% reduction in any quarter, to see whether you'll potentially qualify. with average monthly payroll costs, you can either use the time period 1 year preceding the date of the loan application or 2019. So the easiest thing for most small business owners may be able to dust off the spreadsheets that they put together to figure out the 2019 average monthly payroll costs, because they can use those again. So some of the data that we're leveraging off some of the stuff that we have already used before.
And Brian, one last question. I did read an analyst's points, and this is someone else, but they said that it appeared that there was a clarification and people could now use employer retention tax credit and PPP. Have you come across anything like that? Because that would be a significant change for a lot of.
Yeah, it looks, I mean, preliminarily, I would say it looks that way. I know I've read some of the secondary authorities. I've been spending a lot of time with the statute over the past couple of days. I would say preliminarily, it does look like that. But I think, we're still in the process of verifying some of those details. But yeah, that could be a tremendous shot in the arm for businesses.
And just for anyone listening, what we're talking about there is previously there was employer retention tax credit or PPP. You could not take both of them. And employer retention tax credit gives you up to a $5,000 credit per employee on your federal payroll taxes. Is that correct way?
Yeah, I believe it's jumped up to 10,000 now, but
wow.
And they've changed it. They've changed it so it's on a quarterly basis instead of an annual basis. So based on my reading of it, it seems like you'd be able to get more credit than you would have gotten in the original round. So, but again, like that, those type of things are, we're really getting into the details, and it's a 250-page bill. The whole bill is about 5,500 pages, but the stimulus piece is about 250. There's still things we're trying to figure out. I mean, I think one of the key questions that we're trying to figure out is they define, you have to demonstrate that your gross receipts are down 25%. All right, well, does PPP or HHS, if you're a doctor's office, does that count as a receipt? It would seem like it shouldn't, because that would really seem to defeat the purpose of what we're trying to do here. But I do think we are going to be looking for a clarifying language around what constitutes a receipt for purposes of the statute.
Interesting. Yeah, lots of details to come out. Well, Brian, thanks a lot. I know we'll have you back. We appreciate everything you guys do at Whittlesey. You've given us some great advice throughout the course of the year, and we will be doing more of these webinars coming up into the new year. So Brian, happy holidays, and thanks for the time.
Happy holidays to you too, Garrett. Take care.
Okay, thanks. I'm going to just, Shantae, I'm going to share my screen for a moment. I did just want to let everyone know, I did reach out to DCD. Many of you have been looking into the programs that DCD is offering, as far as they had a program in regards to the CARES Act grant. So let me see if I can get this up the most seamless way possible. Here we go. So I did reach out to DCD this afternoon because what they announced this week was a targeted CARES Act grant program. It's targeted towards hardest hit small to mid-sized businesses, restaurants, bars, food service, retail, lodging, entertainment, and recreation. And the grant sizes are going to be anywhere from $10,000 to $30,000. They expect that they'll be able to service 1,500 to 2,500 businesses. It's considered a bridge to the new PPP. Now, here's the really interesting point, and I did not realize this until today. No applications are necessary. So if you're in one of those businesses that's listed right there, you do not have to apply. DCD is going to be going through Department of Revenue service information, and they'll be finalizing that pool of who is eligible. And then they'll be sending out those checks on December 31st. So again, no need to do anything, but that there are, for those industries listed at the top, restaurants, bars, food service, retail, lodging, entertainment, and recreation, the chance that you may receive a check from $10,000 to $30,000. So I just wanted to pass along that information. Also, if you were part of the program, there was a CARES Act, again, this is through the state of Connecticut, but it's federal funding that came through. If you were part of the small business grant program, these are those $5,000 grants, the approved businesses, the ones that qualify, will start receiving their notification this week. So check your email. You should also, at some point this week, if your application was denied, you would see that all that money has to go out the door from the state by December 31st, although I think there is some language in the stimulus bill that maybe would extend that. But as of right now, it needs to get out the door by December 31st. So you should be getting news on whether you received that $5,000 grant that came out from the state. And then again, if you're one of those industries that were listed there, restaurants, bars, entertainment, recreation, and I'm not sure if that includes nonprofit organizations, but the state will be making decisions on that and contacting you if you were eligible. So a little bit different there, when you have a program where you don't have to apply and all of a sudden you'll get a check, and I think you'll like it if you're the one that receives the check. If not, I'm sure you'll have some questions about what the process was there, but that is the information that I have on it right now. Well, again, I want to thank Sarah Blumenthal for joining us. We wanted to get this programming on. I know it's late, coming up on a holiday, and many people are either on vacation or maybe even zoned out at this point, but it is important information. So at the Chamber, we're always trying to make sure that we're on top of this and getting it out to everyone. Do want to let you know we have our executive orientation program starting in January, and then our regional legislative forum, and we do expect to have Senator Blumenthal, hopefully Senator Murphy as well, Representative DeLauro on January 14th, and then talking with state legislators on the 21st and 28th. And we do have our internship and career and jobs fair this year for 2021. That's going to be on February 25th. And we actually probably will add a couple more days there. It'll be virtual. And then we look forward to later in 2021 joining you in person for our normal slate of events. Again, want to thank everyone for being here. Thank you again to Senator Brian Kerrigan from Whittlesey for sharing his time with us and giving us some answers there on some of those key questions that we had. I hope everyone has a happy holidays, and thank you again. Take care.